okay portion for all of these presenters and principals are to come in through the iPad that I get to deal with up here. But please submit your questions. That's really such a valuable part of this program. So if you're not quite sure how to do that, and I know a lot of us get in Wi-Fi video down here, but there's a way, first of all, there's a way to get on Wi-Fi down here on the back of your badge. It's through a Northrop Grumman Wi-Fi capability, so use that if you need to get on Wi-Fi, and then submit your questions by using the QR code also on your badge. So, thank you. Packed house. Yesterday was a great day. Thank you for coming. Today we're very blessed to have Admiral Caudle with us. He's been very loyal to Surface Navy Association for many, many years, and certainly since he's been in the seat. Admiral Caudle is a native of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a 1985 graduate of North Carolina State University, and he's currently commander of the United States Fleet Forces Command, based in Norfolk. He currently serves as Commander Naval Forces Northern Command and Commander Naval Forces Strategic Command. He organizes, trains, equips, certifies, and deploys over 125 ships and submarines, 1,000 aircraft, 125 sailors and government civilians. He executes an annual budget of $17 billion and is responsible for providing combat-ready forces forward to the numbered fleets, combatant commanders around the globe in support of our U.S. national interests. During past assignments, he was the Commander of Submarine Forces, Commander of Submarine Air Forces Atlantic, and many task forces responsibilities to include 114, 88, Class 88, so got to plug in there for USNA Class 88, CTF 46, and Commander Allied Submarine Command. I was also privileged to go through the new flag course with Admiral Caudle a few years ago. But before he comes up to the podium, please enjoy this next video. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Admiral Daryl Caudle, and thanks for spending a minute with the commander. You can't turn on the news nowadays or log into the internet without hearing about the United States Navy, specifically the amazing men and women of our surface warfare community who continue to defend our national interests around the globe. They truly are the first line of defense. Our Navy's origins started with surface warfare, and to understand the importance of what these sailors and ships are doing, I want to highlight some of the most recent actions. In the Red Sea, Houthi rebels in Yemen have launched attack after attack in the vicinity of destroyers USS Carney, Thomas Hudner, and Mason. Multiple one-way UAVs have been successfully intercepted, a testament to the crew's training, readiness, and warfighting effectiveness. In the Gulf of Aden, in international waters, a Liberian-flagged commercial tanker was nearly seized by armed assailants. When they tried to flee, they were apprehended by the crew of USS Mason and one of our allies, demonstrating the awesome teamwork our Navy integrates around the globe. And then there's USS Indianapolis in the Arabian Gulf, who recently teamed up with the Navy's first unmanned and artificial intelligence task force to execute a successful live-fire exercise, employing both unmanned surface and air vehicles from their warship. Our surface force with its global reach is the most powerful and multi-mission seagoing force the world has ever known, crewed by tough and resilient sailors with a strong heritage and warfighting culture, forged by experience, grit, and tenacity. I couldn't be prouder of what they're doing around the world as I sleep well knowing what keeps our adversaries up at night, our surface Navy. Thanks for spending a minute with the commander.
All right. Man, I could just say questions after that. Excited just listening to it. It's really good. So hopefully everybody here, sleeps as soundly as I do at night. And it's also worth pointing out that the ships highlighted in that video, it's a little dated, are only a few of the combat-hardened crews that have absolutely dominated in the Middle East over the past year. It's a great pleasure for me to publicly celebrate the hard work of the ship's crews, reload teams, and shoreside support that have enabled such a commanding performance. All right, so thank you for inviting me to speak yet again, and thank you, Mary, for the kind introduction, and I look forward to this event each year. How about a round of applause for the S&A team for putting together this incredible schedule of events this week. Now, behind all the displays and presentation, the social events, this is really a bucket list pilgrimage for all surface warriors. I'd like to specifically thank retired Rear Admiral David Hart, retired Captain Chris Bushnell, and Julie Howard for organizing this wonderful event. Okay, so I'm going to get right to it and acknowledge the elephant in the room. Even though this event is a testament to our surface warriors, and many of the keynote speakers this week are SWOs, I am a submariner. I know, not everyone is going to roll their eyes, expect some overused submarine joke about surface ships or targets or going sinker, and I'm not going to indulge in any of that today. In fact, while I enjoy some friendly cross-domain rivalry, I'm not going to risk getting a proverbial Mark 54 dropped on my head by provoking anyone with an untimely or tasteless joke. I will operate above the waves, and I won't bring myself down to that level. Instead, a submariner like me is speaking to you today so I can share my view of surface warfare. That really is funny, isn't it? Okay, maybe just one joke, but after this I'm done, I promise, okay. But seriously, I am so excited and truly honored to be back at S&A, speaking to the leaders of the world's premier surface naval force. Some have said that I've built up a little bit of reputation due to my comments at previous S&As, unafraid to shoot a flare or point out the hard challenges across our enterprise, like ordnance production shortfalls, maintenance and modernization delays, and impediments to achieving maximum combat readiness. Well, this is my fourth time speaking in S&A, and every time I push the edge, I've witnessed an influx of supporting teammates in industry, the Defense Department, and our Navy leaders who share my sentiments and are ready to take real action, advancing our maritime superiority and maintain the enduring overmatch against our adversaries. You know, with the overwhelming positive response I've gotten in the past, I suppose it's best that I maintain that edge again today and make a few waves here too. So why am I here? I'm wearing many hats. The roles of U.S. Fleet Forces are best understood by three interconnected end states. First, in order to maintain the continuity of government, continuity of decision making, and continuity of force generation in peer conflict with a strategic competitor, we must ensure that the homeland does not fall under strategic attack. Therefore, the Navy's contribution to strategic deterrence must be ironclad, without the slightest weakness that could provide even a narrow window to anyone who wishes to target our homeland. Second, Fleet Forces must generate the forces that can flow to the point of need with little notice, armed, trained, and ready to counter an array of complex threats. And finally, we must set the conditions for and enable all of our forces to maneuver resiliently in and through all domains, from seabed to space, within cyberspace, and the information domain, capable of massing and delivering lethal effects synchronized at our timing and tempo. Bottom line, through deterrence, which we must set the environment to generate, arm, and train our force, then flow that force to where it's needed most, and then ensure the force is capable of maneuvering in a very hostile and contested environment, ready to win. Easy to say, much harder to pull off. To boil it all down, it is my responsibility to organize, train, and equip the naval forces under my charge to ensure they are ready to do our nation's bidding by giving our president the most options possible. Now, the bedrock of that force has been and always will be our surface force, armed with the training, toughness, and technology to deter conflicts as they arise, sending a powerful message that anyone who dares to challenge us will face decisive consequences. Of resolute and expert combat performance has been demonstrated by our surface forces in the Red Sea, as you just witnessed, over the course of the last year, splashing down countless incoming missiles and UAVs anytime the Houthis decided to waste their time challenging our extraordinary strike groups. However, the sight picture of the threats and challenges we face are admittedly larger than the Houthi rebels or any other Iranian-backed proxy, with serious consequences due to the changing nature and collaboration amongst them. Make no mistake about it, the PRC has been signaling their capability to invade Taiwan by the rhetoric and by conducting larger and larger naval and amphibious drills. They are hell-bent on reshaping the rules in the Indo-Pacific region to include the revisionist and expansionist claims in the South China Sea and in the Arctic. Through the possibility of war with the PRC by 2027 is one of the major factors that informs and drives the CNO's navigation plan, including our readiness, decisions that we must think globally about our long-term advantage and we cannot sacrifice by putting blinders on to other threats. While they are clearly defined in the National Defense Strategy, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and violent extreme organizations, the fact is that these groups have been growing ever closer to each other, entwining and reinforcing their efforts, creating a new axis of power designed to destabilize the rule-based international order and circumvent the effects of our levers of national power. At last year's SNA, I talked a bit about the joint Chinese and Russian bomber patrols approaching the Philippine Sea, Guam, and the South Korean air defense identification zones. Well, since then, those numbers of joint bomber patrols have increased, but they've also escalated their patrols by turning east toward Alaska, attempting to send us a message that they believe they have the capability to strike our homeland with impunity. Then topped off this escalation with dangerous maneuvers around our intercepting aircraft. Joint Chinese and Russian surface combatants ramped up their combined patrols in the Pacific, extending their no-limits relationship across the sea by conducting joint training and replenishments at sea, with Russian ships and submarines conducting port visits in China. As the Russian invasion of sovereign Ukraine territory is about to finish its third bloody year of savage combat, the relationship between Russia and North Korea has become more interrelated with the signing of a mutual treaty last November. The DPRK is supplying Russia with missiles and artillery, in addition to North Korean fighters on the ground in Ukraine. Iran, too, is aiding in this aggression by arming Russian Federation with weaponized drones and ballistic missiles to turn onto Ukraine civilians, and have deepened their relationship with Russia to establish a new world order, as recently described by Iran's president. In addition to the escalatory attack on Israel, Iran continues to pour gasoline on the flames of conflict in the Middle East, funding and equipping proxy armies in Gaza, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen, and they do not think twice about taking civilian hostages or attacking innocent merchant ships. In the face of sanctions designed to limit Iran's ability to raise revenue from petroleum exports, guess who's buying the majority of their oil and undermining U.S. sanctions? Said it, China. So you can see our competitors are acting more in step, collaborating, cooperating, aiding and abetting each other in an attempt to kneecap the international rules-based order and exert their influence in ways that benefit them at the expense of any other nation who desires a free global economy. No longer do the threats fit neatly within our unified command plan boundaries. These threats are global, they are interconnected, and we can't afford to focus on them one at a time in a stovepiped fashion. Leveraging this increased collaboration means we must be ready with a fierce and resilient force, leveraging strength through endurance, partnerships, and overwhelming joint and combined lethality. The speed of modern warfare, combined with ever-shrinking indications and warning windows, means we won't have the luxury of long lead times to bring our full capabilities of our fleet to bear. We will be given a short window to ramp up our forces, kick into overdrive, generate ships and crews who are trained, ready, and hungry to take the fight to the enemy. You'll hear that we've enjoyed the fruits of the peace dividend for far too long, shifting and designing our processes to generate a smaller, steady stream of forces for peacetime global presence. With what I've just described regarding the complex threat environment we face, those days are over. I'd rather just call it the way it is when it comes down to our primary job. We must remain focused on producing the most powerful force possible that is trained and certified for lethal, agile, multi-domain naval combat with the skills and kit to fight and win our nation's wars. Quantity does and will make a difference. You'll often hear Navy leaders say phrases like, when the balloon goes up, everyone in the pier and the hangar goes. But how does that happen in practice? Who's got that for action? There are simply no magic beans that make that phrase true. Simply said, our Navy's response plans must be designed, ready, and practiced to flow overwhelming naval combat power forward to the point of conflict or crisis. Mass will matter in high-end conflict. To achieve this goal at scale, our response plans require a holistic watch bill. A watch bill of units underwritten by improved PESTO management and certification processes that are designed to get our forces out the door, in which the most ready ships leave first and those that need more weapons, food, repair, or additional combat training follow. Our existing model of steady peacetime force generation, or the Optimized Fleet Response Plan, or OFRP, was created during a period of unquestioned American dominance. Unfortunately, it is neither optimized nor responsive for flowing combat-ready units out of phase with little to no notice. The reason it falls so short of this goal is predominantly based in a key assumption that simply does not hold: that units returning from deployment would be sustained in a combat-ready status for at least 6 months. Maintenance and modernization challenges prevent that from occurring, not to mention shortages with ordnance and sailors. OFRP was designed to operate like a 36-month conveyor belt, providing a steady flow of global forces that are exquisitely trained and equipped to execute multiple peacetime mission sets, in addition to high-end modern combat in an affordable manner. Specifically, for years, we've been able to rob Peter to pay Paul across PESTO bins between strike group units to meet our peacetime deployment and joint force presence requirements. Unfortunately, as everyone should be able to figure out, peer adversaries do not design their war plans against our OFRP. They don't attack when the blue blazer schedule is healthiest. In fact, just the opposite. If ORP is anything, it is predictable by design. That predictability, coupled with the use of social media posts that illuminate our scheduled events, like Comp 2X and deployment underways, can only embolden our adversaries' planning and confidence. But when embers flash to major conflict with a peer competitor, we must be ready and not victimized by a peacetime force generation model. Further, we can't just do OFRP faster, opening the throttles another few turns and expect every ship tied to the pier to be converted into a combat surge-ready unit just in time. The bad news is for our peer adversaries is we are not victims. We are not sitting idly by, constrained to the output of the OFRP. We are working on building a Navy that is truly optimized for combat flow to support our O-plan requirements. We must be, and we are, in run now. Think about it this way. Our Navy has about 300 ships, to make my math example easier. Every day, about 100 of those ships are deployed around the globe. Furthermore, about 100 of those ships are in lengthy depot maintenance availabilities that would take weeks, if not months, to close out and button them up to get all the existing work and returning systems back into service. This leaves the last 100 ships that are not deployed nor in depot, and the question is, can we do more with those ships to make them ready to flow into combat? The answer is hell yes, and we are. These ships are in various stages of the OFRP that range between return deployers and sustainment, to basic phase complete, to some gearing up for SWAT, as well as some of them deep in integrated phase. But I need all of them ready to fight and be certified to an acceptable level of risk to force and mission. To better leverage these 100 ships, at last year's SNA, I unveiled some work that we have been putting into the Global Maritime Response Plan, or GMRP. A plan that is a full spectrum, Navy-wide plan that identifies assumptions, permissions, authorities, and waivers that activate stakeholders to meet the increased demand tied to indications and warnings, articulated through readiness conditions, or RESCONs, to signal changes in generating, prioritizing, and sustaining combat-ready forces. Knowing we will fight the next conflict with the Navy we have, the GMRP is designed to maximize the ability for the CNO to shift our Navy from peacetime to war, opening the spigot on the number of ships, aircraft, and platforms available for our response plans within an operationally relevant timeline. A lot of work has gone into the GMRP since its unveiling last year, including some detailed planning by our type commanders. We are very excited to test the GMRP and RESCONs during this year's large-scale exercise. Now, to get these 100 ships in various stages of the OFRP into fighting form to execute high-end, sustained modern combat far from our shores, what will they need? Ammunition, spare parts, food, more stabilized manning to meet their watch bills. When baked into the GMRP, our TICOMs can identify and plan for the people and kit shortages necessary to meet the timing requirements defined in the response plan. While I can have a part to bring a system back to full functionality, the one thing I can't surge is knowledge, mastery, and the skills required by sailors and watch teams who are proficient and certified to shoot, defend, maneuver, and communicate in combat. Even the most sophisticated training takes time, and though our sailors are the best in the world, I can't expect them to be proficient after 2 days in a process that takes months. That's where the Combat Surge Ready certification shines. A formal process and designation that has been assessed and the ship has earned its place on the response plan watch bill. Now, hopefully by now you're familiar with the term Combat Surge Ready. The CNO identified it as one of our Project 33 targets under readying our platforms. A big part of readying our platforms involves ensuring that we eliminate delays for our maintenance overruns, getting our platforms in and out of maintenance and modernization periods on time. However, 2 other aspects exist here. As we aggressively tackle the issues facing us with maintenance delays, and that goes without saying, we must consider the other side of the coin. What do we do with the ships that aren't in maintenance today? And second, the much needed improvements to our shipyard challenges will not likely substantially add mass to our available numbers by 2027. That's just a practical fact. Therefore, we must be well thought out on how we will train, certify, and sustain forces that are ready to surge into combat in a short notice, an outcome that the OFRP was never designed to create. Up front, Combat Surge Ready is not a substitute for OFRP, nor is it an out-of-cycle fourth-generation process. It is a tip-fed certification milestone achieved within the existing OFRP framework that maximizes the readiness capacity of our Navy. Combat Surge Ready is a formal designation by the respective type commander that a platform and crew are ready to fight, ready to plug into any strike group or task force, and that it has proven it can shoot, defend, maneuver, and communicate within any integrated joint or combined arms organizational structure. That's where our objective of achieving and sustaining 80% combat surge ready posture for ships, submarines, and aircraft enters the crosshairs. When we sustained 80% combat surge ready, or better, for all ships not in depot maintenance, the number of platforms ready to surge and flow into combat goes from 100 to 180. That's a pretty big effort to get more players on the field. Similar to how our submarines earn their combat readiness surge designation, the way the submarine force does it through the completion of their tactical readiness evaluation, our crew does earn their place on the surface response plan after successful completion of SWAT, which is the Surface Warfare Advanced Training. This formal designation signifies that the crew is ready to surge into combat if required. The TICOMs note the PESTO shortfalls of their combat surge ready designated units and are constantly working to manage and improve them. Okay, so once we define the requisite skills and capabilities to designate a ship combat surge ready, how do we grow the numbers and sustain it? We need to be laser focused on the ships that are exiting maintenance availabilities and starting the basic phase to get these ships up to speed as fast as possible. This is where creativity, innovation, and enhanced training density comes into the picture. The goal of sustaining 80% combat surge ready will require some new ways of thinking that may be uncomfortable for some. But we know our force structure will certainly not change between now and 2027 and will not really significantly change over the next decade. Bottom line, we must constantly be making ready ships not in depot or currently deployed. Further, if SWAT is the CSR certification event, we can't afford to have ships waiting around to execute SWAT based on the strike group schedule. Ships should conduct SWAT and matriculate to combat surge ready when they're ready, not based on an arbitrary schedule. It only happens once or twice a year. Conducting more SWATs is just good business. It not only ensures the highest number of units are ready to surge into combat with the ability to operate independently or with any strike group or task force, but it also allows tactical best practices and doctrinal lessons to be more fully developed. Further, right now, today, we have the ability to use and leverage live, virtual, and constructive training to significantly upscale the SWAT of yesteryear into high-end training scenarios, ratcheting up the complexity, the sophistication, and realism of peer conflict against expected enemy orders of battle in synthetic geographies anywhere in the world. The best part is we can do all this either underway or pierside. If we keep doing business as usual and having units post-basic phase waiting around for other ships in the strike group to conduct SWAT, then we are leaving combat surge readiness on the table and suboptimizing our ability to flow our naval force. Fortunately, in large part, due to the leadership sitting right down on this front row with Admirals McLean and Cahill, this is all beginning to change. Our surface force is leaning in, head first into our surge readiness challenge, sharpening the sword by conducting additional SWATs at a higher periodicity, like once a quarter, to get more ships on the surface response watch bill. Even with that paradigm shift effort, I won't be satisfied until our crew DES units are certified combat surge ready after a newly envisioned basic phase. To do that, we'll have to push the limits of our training density, our training model, our sustainment of watch standard proficiency, and how we employ LVC to test every single aspect of high-end combat across all the certified mission sets. To accomplish this goal, we must scale what we have learned from the success of our Task Force Greyhound model, including shorter, more frequent availabilities, better designed and phased modernization periods, aggressive material management, and more stable manning levels based on experience level and watch bill. When this is combined with exquisite LVC-enabled training and certification, I can see a Navy one day that is nearly 100% of the operational units combat surge ready. Think of a Navy that can be sustained in what is essentially a CONUS-based FDNF readiness model. I'm sure a few eyebrows went up, but why not? It should be obvious to everyone by now that business as usual is not a winning strategy against our peer adversaries. When we say all hands on deck, what have we done to transform that slogan into reality? Admittingly, there are challenges we face to sustain our ability to surge our fleet with functioning equipment, with competent sailors to operate it, especially across the suite of C5I systems. That's why I've been pushing so hard to move additional certifications left in the workup cycle, like restoring DG SIT to an actual assessment of the capabilities and defining the information warfare requirements to certify combat surge ready, making a ship's IW capabilities much wholer earlier in the OFRP. Right now we have ships in late stages of the OFRP, past the point when they should have already been designated combat surge ready without completed installations, grooms, or SOVATs of critical C5I systems on board. This detracts from our sailors' ability and opportunity to gain mastery over these systems that have emerged as the most important in the lessons we're learning from Red Sea combat operations. Instead, ready relevant learning is modernizing content with multiple delivery options to provide the right training in the right manner at the right time, arming our sailors with the skills and knowledge to support the ever-growing complexity of today's mission sets. To improve the readiness oversight and ISIC continuity of surface ships. We've also stood up the naval surface groups, or surf groups, to resolve issues like rapid response to material casualties, early resolution of manning shortfalls, and serving as the area commander and subject matter experts during large-scale waterfront casualties. What's next? Determining what our combat surge-ready model is for aircraft carriers and air wings. How do we certify a carrier in the OFRP as combat surge-ready independent of the embarked strike group or air wing? Similarly, how do we certify an air wing or individual squadrons to be ready to surge in order to replace losses during high-end conflict? My team is working closely with the Air Boss and many other stakeholders on these definitions and certification processes. Bottom line, we should be doing everything we can to minimize the amount of time an operational unit isn't ready to surge into combat. We owe the CNO and our combatant commanders that level of warfighting readiness. Addressing the barriers that get in the way of that is what GMRP is designed to solve now. Thinking through the tough problems now. Building out the necessary decision support matrices now. And designing the response conditions now. And the associated pre-planned actions for each stakeholder organization to transition between those rescons. While we are taking actionable steps to get real in the face of some of these challenges, know too that there's a lot more that must be done to get better. Examples like ships remaining in depot maintenance past their planned end dates, storerooms and warehouses with insufficient quantities of critical spare parts, and deferred repairs that eat away at our redundancy and endurance. Why are we accepting the fact that a ship can be extended for months in a maintenance availability? Even though we are on an improving trend, the on-time completion of CNO availabilities is still only around 60%, restricting the number of ships we can count on during conflict. Even with improving maintenance availability execution, our sailors are hampered by historically ineffective and cumbersome work practices, enshrined in an obsolete portfolio of stovepiped information systems and poorly integrated computer programs. Imagine if SCED, MFOM, eTagout, EWAF, and ATIS were all operating as one system, equipped in an interactive with interactive diagrams, 3D renderings, videos, all linked to technical specifications and parts, and all available at the job site with a handheld tablet. Now picture that system automatically syncing precise material condition data to repair operation centers, enabling rapid decisions to better respond and prioritize material needs, cannibalizations, and schedule change resolution. The system I've just described is in run. It is the Navy Maintenance Repair and Overhaul System, or NMRO. We fielded version 1 on board USS Mitcher last year with incredible learning on that version. And we got version 2 being built, and we will get that on another DDG this year. Recognizing the impact of material self-sufficiency at sea and during maintenance availabilities on battle readiness cannot be overstated. Our learning must continue. In the face of constraints like inadequate ordnance production, we must also accelerate fielding low-cost munitions, giving the small one-way UAV threats with optimized missile capabilities currently being produced for the Joint Force that are better matched price-wise with sufficient kill probability in order to save our main offensive weapons batteries. We have prototyped several of these new systems with very promising results and hope to deploy them on the Forward Strike Group later this year. Of course, the ultimate goal here is directed energy, made lethal with renewable power. We should all be embarrassed that we have tinkered with directed energy systems on board our ships for over 30 years. In fact, my published thesis from the Naval Postgraduate School in 1992 was on the use of free electron lasers on Navy ships. Further, with our ability to virtualize the Aegis combat system with a digital twin, why do we have any DDG deployed that is anything less than the latest version? I like the Aegis in a box idea and want to scale that idea until we truly achieve racks for life, especially for DDGs undergoing life extensions. Admittedly, there are no magic beans that will fix these issues easily. All of these areas require commitment, ruthless innovation, fast failures, true organizational learning, and an understanding of the risk transfers that occur that optimize our overmatch. But what choice do we really have? If we aren't doing something now, today, with Hyman G. Rickover level dogma, focus, and oversight to bring these types of necessary changes into reality. We're already behind a fast-moving curve in which our ability to win our nation's wars decisively against our peers shrinks with every passing day. As I bring my remarks to an end, I challenge you to not rest on your laurels. Our dominance in the maritime environment is not foreordained or promised to us. Fixing these issues will require coordination, transparent embracing of problems, clear-eyed root cause analysis, hard work and tough decisions to cut through the excuses and slogging pace that we have grown accustomed to living with across our various technical enterprises. Don't succumb to problem admiration, overwhelmed that effective solutions are too hard or consume too much time, money, or energy. We must all be playing long game here, albeit with fast learning cycles. Our past performances do not prescribe our end state. We are not shackled by our current processes and outputs. I challenge all of you to Google and watch Peter Deming's Red Bead experiment with your organizational leaders and knowledge. And for those who don't understand what I just said, that is in itself a statement. Further, a lesson learned is not just simply an experience exposed or a deficiency defined. Finding out what you didn't know is not the same as improving. True learning requires corrective actions to actual processes, procedures, and knowledge deficiencies that drive recurrent deficiencies down to the lowest practical level. Getting real on what's not working and then taking actual steps to get better will yield outsized impacts on the future of our surface platforms, our sailors, our response options, and our Navy's combat power. Though I have addressed a lot of changes across the enterprise that need to be made, recognize I do so with constructive dissatisfaction. My job is to point out areas that we can improve on, even when we think we've got it all figured out. So don't be fooled into thinking that all is lost. Our surface forces aren't dominating the maritime domain. Don't believe that. They are. Because it is simply not true. And if it's not more clear when you look hard at our performance in the face of all these challenges in the video I've just shown, it should be widely obvious that we do. Ships like Gravely, Mason, Laboon, Kearney, Phil C, completing combat patrols, feeding back lessons learned for our next deployers. Ships like Wasp, New York, and Oak Hill, providing regional stability and deterring aggression in the Baltic and Eastern Mediterranean. Ships like Gettysburg, Stout, Bulkley, Stockdale, Sullivan's, Jason Dunham, and O'Kane on combat patrols in the Mediterranean, Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden right now. Ships like Dilbert D. Black, Truxton, and Donald Cook ready to surge at a moment's notice to defend our homeland. Make no mistake, no adversary in their right mind wants to take on our surface fleet. No adversary comes close to the all-inspiring power of the U.S. surface combatant. Our surface warriors are feared. That's because of the Herculean efforts of American warfighters, the leadership, mastery, toughness, capabilities, training that transforms our exquisite multi-mission ships into an unprecedented combat force. If our surface forces are achieving that level of unparalleled overmatch right now, even with the challenges we face, imagine what our fleet is capable of when we get after these problems and remove all the barriers I've discussed together. Thank you for the time today. I look forward to getting things done with you, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
There has been no doubt that there's alignment in what we've heard yesterday and today from the CNO, from the surface warfare leadership, from you. Thank you again for taking some time with us. So we're going to jump right in. We've got a lot of questions already. So first off, I'm going to ask you one. We've talked about a lot about the AORs, right? The threat, the AORs, everything's happening in the Red Sea, China. Talk about the Arctic too with us for a few minutes.
Yeah.
How do you think about the Arctic?
Well, I've been on an Arctic campaign for about a year or so, maybe a little longer, because it's not well understood, Mary, and it's an area that is so abundant in resources, it's going to be fought over. And this is rare earth minerals, this is natural gas, this is petroleum, among other things. It is an area, because of the shrinking cap, will become a transit route with more months out of the year. That's an indisputable fact. It is an area that Russia wants to claim as theirs. Okay, they've gone on record. They do hold an 11 time zone coastline up there as an Arctic nation. And it is, in my opinion, they would be happy to draw a dotted line, a 9-dash line around the North Pole and say this is ours. And all that burgeoning relationship I discussed between Russia and China, this is a place where I don't think they're on the same page. So China's trying to get, some foothold there as well. So it's anything, when I say the Arctic, we do tend to think about the polar cap. But the Arctic is really anything above the Arctic Circle. So our Navy has a responsibility to be world-class up there across what I consider 3 lines. The first one is we have to have some presence there. I mean, we have to move around in the battle space. And it's a harsh battle space because of its climate and latitude. The second thing, you have to have capabilities to do warfare there. Those are communication systems and weapon systems that you can fight in that area. And the third thing it takes is partnerships. And the partnership piece is so crucial for the Arctic because there's an Arctic Council that really is the governance body for the Arctic. And while that's been kind of defunct a bit since Russia, who is part of the Arctic Council, has invaded Ukraine, we gained 2 additional Arctic Council members into NATO. So like, yay US on that. And so this thing with the Arctic is extremely important. So it can be off the radar, but if we do not keep steady strain there, and the Navy is about to sign out a new Arctic strategy, then I think we're going to end up ceding that area to the Russians and or Chinese, and that's just unacceptable.
Thank you. Lots to keep adding to the plate, right?
Yes.
Working across dotted lines, working across the scenes, certainly came up yesterday, team of teams. You have a lot on your plate. Here's a question. Let me just read it right off the iPad. Are you afraid the conventional surface vessel production delays will be outpaced by the production and rapid application of shorter lead time unmanned systems? Following INJAD's lead of reevaluation, sorry about that, do you think that our surface vessels will become comparatively outmatched by unmanned systems?
Yeah, I'm going to try to maybe restate it. So there's competition there because of a defense industrial base on always, and a little bit Senator Kane talked about it, what do we build and how much of each? So there's there's resources that we have in our budgets. How do we partition that out in the appropriate ratios to make sure we're building the most capable and lethal Navy that is matched to the threats that we face? So it's not a capabilities-based Navy, it's a threat-based Navy. And so to do that effectively requires a deep understanding and assessment of the key operational problems that are baked into those threats. So first I'll just say, in anyone's lifetime in this room, and I'm about to have my 5th grandkid, maybe even as early as today, we will never see, even that grandchild will never see where an unmanned vehicle will take the place of a manned combatant. That's just not going to happen. It's not even the right way to think about it. And so the right way, in my opinion, to think about robotic, autonomous systems, uncrewed, unmanned systems is how we package them to solve our problems and where they are best suited. And Senator Kane again mentioned some of this, but they can be best suited where the acceptable level of risk of loss of life is too high. The depth of water too shallow, the air domain too complicated, the mission's just not worth a manned combatant. Okay, so there's just balance there. We are still nascent in figuring out those, I'll call them, robotic autonomous system force packages. If somebody asks me a use case of how do we do something with one of these, I can tell you we're world class. If I want to go take a picture of something, I can fly a drone over with a world class camera, take the picture, and we're great at that. If I want to go paint the bottom with high frequency sonar with an unmanned vehicle, I'm great at that. If I want to put something out to collect, ships that are going by with a cell drone, I'm great at that. But the way we fight in the Navy is through units of force that are packaged to make them lethal packages, okay? We build together a composite system knowing how we're going to be countered and knowing what we need to actually win against that hypothetical scenario. That's the work that's ongoing right now, is how we build out those force packages.
Right. And let's talk about equipping for a minute. There's a question that came in that I just lost that had to do with ready spares.
Okay.
And yesterday when we talked about logistics, instead of this just-in-time, just-in-case logistics, which means more, right? I mean, that's how you articulate it.
Yeah.
Is you got to have more on the shelf and be ready. Is the procurement process adaptable enough for that?
I think we all know the answer to that is no, it is not. But I would say the answer is a lot bigger than that. You know, in a career, Mary, you know this, we serve in multiple jobs. So sometimes I can get fussed at that, you know, there's Caudle there in charge of force generation and readiness, that he's touting, you know, this readiness because it tends to be in my job jar. That's just not true. Across any job I've ever had, I think I would have kept a consistent worldview that there is nothing that pays us back more than the repair parts being organically on our ships is good money, okay? It's just good money. And that's just not a place I think we should be taking any risk or kind of, you know, not prioritizing that in the budget. We have not always taken that view as a Navy, and we have deficits. And when we get short, and that can be because of continuing resolutions or other problems we have with our budget structure, where we tend to write that check historically has been in spare parts. So then we, you know, the term bow wave that into the next fiscal year. Well, you know, like anything else, it goes through certain cycles of that. You're on a decay curve of that. Because when you go regroup that, you never regroup back to the place you would have been. So there's this kind of all these, this chipping away. And when you do the aggregating of that, you're talking about billions of dollars of repair parts if I want to go make that whole. I'm not going to be able to eat that all in one budget cycle. So these are multi-budget kind of fit-ups, if you will, decisions to get that line healthier. We have deployed some of our strike groups in better readiness spares models to test that. We know that pays dividend. And then the last part I would say, if you're fighting a peer competitor and you think I can just push onboard tech reps to them, I can get parts out to them, I can fly something out to them, I mean, that's just fantasy. That's not high-end combat. So our ships have to be self-sufficient. And at Fleet Forces, we have now developed dashboards that we're looking at that measures the ship's ability to be self-sufficient as a key metric I'm monitoring.
I'm glad you mentioned the dashboards. You know, just rolled out, I saw something on social media with regards to, you know,
the things that she's looking at.
The things that she's looking at.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the nesting, right? So the nesting of her data and what she gets versus what you get.
It's 100% linked. So, it's all coming from the same definitive sources.
Yeah, that's really good. So I know we're out of time, but I'm going to give you two other kind of easy questions.
Okay.
So the first is, you know, what you talked about, someone could say is super aspirational. How is it translating down to the deck plate? To the sailors, and talk a little bit about, you're doing a lot of stuff with quality service. So
yes.
If you can talk about that real quick.
Well, the quality of service initiatives, you know, post-GW cluster suicide investigation has been a place that everyone has circled the wagons around. I've never seen more unionized view of the same idea that quality of service being defined as quality of life plus quality of work with the same psych pictures I have here. Just a spattering, I know we're running short on time, but things like 4 parking deck projects that are in the works at Huntington Ingalls at Newport News Shipbuilding. Okay, parking, we have blown that off for decades. Now we're getting after it. Improved barracks, we're really attacking that. Senator Kane did not mention this, but I expect it to be part of the overall budget, is that every sailor will have the ability to get BAH. No sailor in the 21st century should ever call their home the ship. The ship is where we fight, it's not where we live. Okay, so all sailors need to be in a world-class barracks that we'd expect at a high-end college dorm room, and in that they ought to have Wi-Fi. The Navy, your Navy has led that, and Secretary Olson has picked that up, made that department-wide, but the Navy has gotten Wi-Fi into the barracks. And so medical, I could go down almost any line that came out of that investigation. We've been all ahead flank at all of that. So I'm really, really proud of the quality of service initiatives, including food options, and there's just so many, I can't go through them all, but I want everybody to be rest assured that this matters to sailors. What my speech is today is for a level that, you know, that I want the leaders to get that push to the deck plate, and and we'll see how that turns out. But I think any sailor that knows they're on a combat watch bill and has the pride of knowing they've earned that place on that watch bill is better than one that's just sitting there in no man's land.
There's no doubt there's enthusiasm, and hopefully there's some buy-in all the way down. I'm so sorry that we're out of time. There are other questions coming in. I know that everyone would love to spend time with you. We've got the Vice Chief coming up at 11, but please, any final remarks that you have for this incredible group? Lots of industries, lots of partners.
Well, hopefully you see, independent of the warfare pen, how seriously we take the Surface Navy. SNA just does such an incredible job, and it's such a privilege to be invited to be part of this. And I have no closer friends on earth than Brendan McLean and Joe Cahill. And I have great partnerships with them. And they are extraordinary leaders, and they are the visionaries behind my pitch today. They are making that happen. So there's no daylight between us. I'm very proud to call them friends.
Awesome. Thank you again. Thank you, Admiral, for being here.
Thank you.